Good afternoon. Welcome to Haz'el Inspirations. We are back in Virginia with Mr. Ford. I'm your host, Leah, and we are going to continue on our episode with Mr. Ford. But this episode is a little bit different. This one, we're going to discuss more about the Moorish Americans and the prison system. We're going to do a little deeper dive into this. And Mr. Ford, I'm going to let you take charge because I want to educate myself and I want to educate our listeners. But I want you to briefly introduce, the history, the overview of Moorish Americans, and I want you to then highlight how it applies to the prison system, how there are legal and social issues within the prison system. And then we're going to take a little bit of break, and then we're going to come back because I have a couple more questions. So, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
All right.
We haven't spoken in a while because I've been away.
Right.
But I know that this is not our conclusion, but this is just the beginning of this topic because there is a vast area in this topic that we need to get out. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah. Well, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, which is important to know. I always got to give honor to the Prophet because he is the one who brought the Moors in America this message, this understanding of identity. And it was important when he did it. He was born in 1886 in the state of North Carolina. And he brought this message and information to us because it was, he was born like 21 years outside of the time of the abolition of slavery. So they just came out of Civil War, and you had a lot of, and we call our people Asiatic, so we had a lot of people coming over here, the people that we know as blacks at the time. They might have been called Negroes, they might have been called slaves. They came from various places. Many of them were here already, and many were coming from other places. They were coming from Africa, West Africa, South Africa, North Africa. They were coming from diverse places. And where the Prophet came, he came to a place that had just ended one system of governance. So that system was a plantation or a slave system, and they had people had a status. So you had the ruling class and you had the enslaved class, just to keep it simple. And when you had the people coming out of that enslavement, it's like, well, just because you were released from that enslavement does not mean that you know your place in that society. Nor do the people that had you in the enslaved situation know your place in that society. They only know how to deal with you in a certain way. And if you just, without going further into the history real quick, let me just
actually, wait. I do want you to go a little bit into the history, just a little. I want to know about the cultural practices.
Right. So again, when you like, I'm going to get to the cultural practices. When you come out of a system, just like me coming out of a prison, and I've known myself to be in that identity for a long time as a prisoner or an inmate or a convict or whatever they call you, an offender. And so I'm disconnected from my identity. I'm disconnected from who I am. I'm disconnected from my culture. So that's important that you have somebody to come back and teach you affirmatively to reconnect to your culture. Like, not to just come out of that enslaved, cut off, isolated dynamic that you were in, and just wander, but to make a conscious effort to connect to your identity of who you were before you fell into that enslavement. Because a lot of times that is why you fall into it, because once you disconnect from it, you disconnect from your mother and your father. If you take it simply, you disconnect from what your mother or your father or your neighborhood or people that were good in your life taught you. If you had good people, you should have had somebody good, but you become disconnected, so you can lose your cultural identity. You can lose your understanding of who you are. So you need a prophet, you need a person to come and teach you those things. So that is what in a nutshell, the more Science Temple engages in, and even outside in the street, outside in society, and inside of the prison, we make an affirmative practice of teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed. So when we say we teach our people their nationality and their divine creed, because nationality is something that carries so much information with it. It carries your flag, it carries your treaties, it carries your status, it carries your way that you relate to that government, and your creed. It carries as well your culture. It carries your creed is, you can say it's your religion. You can say it's your dance, it's your cooking, it's your language, it's your style of dress, it's the way that you have your house set up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know that, then someone else will take you and they will put you in their system. If you abandon yours, then they will take you and put you in their system, and they will repurpose you in accordance with whatever national identity or subject identity that they come up with. So when you have people who are called, when you don't adhere to who you are, somebody can place a label on you. Just like if you don't identify yourself, like the police can come up and say, well, what's your name? And you say, I don't want to give you my name or whatever. If they lock you up, let's say, and they put you in the system, they will call you John Doe.
Right.
They will put that label on you. I'll just pick one out of here and give it to you. And I can ascribe to you the rights or privileges that I give to John Doe's.
Right.
So now that's not a person with an identity that you had, that you cared for, that you cultivated, and that you presented to the world to be respected. That's something that somebody gave you. So when we look at things like in the temple, we talk a lot about, okay, these identities, Negro, Black, colored, we say MBC. And then we look into what these labels meant, because that's not what we called ourselves before we fell into an enslaved situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't call ourselves Negro. We didn't call ourselves Black in that way. And we didn't call ourselves colored. So when we start breaking down those terms, we're like, yeah, those things remove you from your identity. That's what you call denationalizing. So when you denationalize somebody, you totally separate them from everything that backs that person up. If I take a Chinese person and I separate him from his flag, his land, his language, his martial arts, his dance, his music, his cooking, and I put him in McDonald's hamburger shop, and I can change him into the employee of the month, and he's got a name tag that we assign to him. Well, he can succeed all he wants flipping burgers, but that's not who he is. So when that system fails, if McDonald's goes out of business, or I'm not, picking on that chain of food, but if that place goes out of business and he is left out to wander, well, everyone else should go back to where they came from before they started working at that location. But if you have people that, their history is pretty much eradicated, then you need somebody to purposely teach you those things and reconnect you. People without that are people that don't have respect. So anybody, even the people that are coming over here right now, coming from other countries and nations, if they don't come with their flag in hand, which would include their treaties, their laws, if they don't come with that information in hand, that government doesn't have to respect them like they would a person coming with their flag and their treaty and their government behind them. They call those people, of a diminished status. They will call them illegal immigrants. You migrated here illegally, or you are, some other substatus, and they can, what we say, they can heap abuses upon you because you don't really have anything that we have to respect. So, like, you don't have a nation like this has a nation. So what we do to you here, we must do to you there, or they must do to us there, because it's a balancing act. When people go into treaty, it's because you will guarantee rights to each party. When I deal with you, we will deal like this. And when you deal with me, you will deal with me like this. And that's fair. But if you have people that don't have a nation in a nation that respects nations, and that's a key principle of the United States, is citizenship or is nationality. And whether you are a citizen of your nation or a citizen of this nation. So and they have to respect your customs, your creed, your language, everything, because that's in the treaties. That's how we deal with each other. So if what we teach in the system, what the prophet gave us, what we teach in the system, what we teach on the street to our people, is to reconnect to our vast identity. We say it's our divine and vast estate. So when you look at our vast estate, it's one thing to say your estate. Your estate is something that you inherit. It's your land. It could be your principles. It could be something that's finite and tangible, or it could be an intangible, but it relates to you.
Okay, let me ask you a question there. When you're on the inside, how are you identifying who is a Moorish? What stands out about them that's different from someone else?
Well, what we say, that these people come from Northwest and Southwest Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So if you identify in that way, right? If you know that you are the people with these names and labels placed upon you, Negro, black, colored, etc. We might say Ethiopian, we might say Native American, because when we say the word Africa, we include more than just the continent of Africa.
Okay.
Because we look at that as a time when it was connected, and that name is not actually the real name of the land, but it includes major parts of Africa, all of the continent of Africa, as well as North America, Central America, South America, the islands. So when we look at it in that way, because a lot of our people did not come here as slaves. So sometimes you could be enslaved more with the pen and curriculum than you ever actually were in history. Just somebody can teach somebody that they were a slave, and then they think that their history was enslavement, and that itself is enslavement, just mental slavery.
Okay.
So sometimes you could just be enslaved mentally, and the enslavement can continue until today. So there is, like we say, we the prophet's duty and what our duty is to elevate those people from those names and labels that were given to you by slaveholders during the time of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. So you have to actually, and it says in the like not to get too specific, but in a lot of international treaties and declarations and documents, that every person has a right to a nationality. Now, that's something that went right over my head before I came into the prison and came into contact with the brothers in the temple. I gotta give credit to brothers Daniel Zell. Actually, the first Moor I met in the system was brother Bullock Bay, and then I've been dealing with that for a long time. But then when I officially came into the temple, brother Daniel Zell was a Grand Sheik at the time, and when I was under the teaching of the Grand Sheik, the assistant Grand Sheik, the Sunday school instructor, as we call it. That's how we run our temple. And then when I went to other locations, I met, large amount of Moors inside the system that were in the process of learning our nationality and our divine creed. So when you're going through this knowledge, it is so you can elevate, so you can gain something about yourself, something that you did not know, that you didn't even know that you had. So one thing that they teach in school is they say, well, a lot of the people that were here were considered 3/5 of a person. So, and no one ever questioned what the 3/5 was. You just accepted that as a fact. Like all the blacks, all the African Americans or whatever, they were considered 3/5 of a person. And everybody just accepted that. And they say, so you weren't a whole person as it relates to voting. You weren't a whole person as it relates to a census. So when you sit back and no one ever asked a teacher, well, why 3/5? Like, why was that divided? Why was man divided into 5 parts? And it goes back to we could say Masonic, but a lot of they get their information from us. But man is divided into a certain type of knowledge, and this is the type of knowledge that was used by the people who were running the government, the constitutional government. Man was divided into 5 parts. Man was a spirit, a soul, a body, and then he has nationality and creed. Well, if I have a process to cut off your nationality and your creed, then you are a 3/5 person. You only have a spirit, a soul, and a body. You don't have a nationality and creed. So if I tell you you can't speak your own language, that's part of your creed. If I tell you you can't cook your own food, you only got to cook food over here, that's part of your creed. If I take away the place that I picked you up from, or if I denationalize you, even if you were here, because they were, like, if you look at the stories, they were saying, well, they were taking some of the, what they call the Native Americans, which were Asiatics, which were Moors that were already here, and putting them into slavery. So they were denationalizing them as well, because they treated the native tribes as nations. And those were the ones that were actually teaching the Europeans when they came over here how to live on the land. So, and how, where to plant, where to grow your food, what time, how do the seasons affect us over here. So, and they were also teaching them principles of government. So when you denationalize those people and you put them in a different identity, or you erase that part of identity, so you get rid of the nationality and creed. So that's why we say we are teaching our people their nationality and their creed.
All right. Question. Okay. So 3 questions. What is the representation of the Moors in the prison system? That's 1. 2, how does the legal system address the Moors' rights? And 3, any religious and cultural needs, are they being met or neglected? I'm talking about people on the inside, because I want to see how this all ties in from the historical content you just provided me.
Well, if we go to, like, we can look at it legally, like what the DOC is supposed to provide as far as guaranteed rights. Okay, so like, let's look at something simple like the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And it says you have a right to practice your own religion. You have a right to have free speech. And you have a right to address the courts, to redress your grievances with the courts. You have a right to press, free press, which is papers, publications. So you have several rights. And so in the prison system, they have to protect those rights. So, and the way to protect it is allow people to have their religious services. All right. So whether it's the Moorish symbol, whether it's Nation of Islam, whether it's Christianity, whether, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's your religion, they have to provide a way to facilitate that. So if I say, okay, well, I'm a Moorish American and this is my religious practice and creed, and I need time to be able to do that.
Right.
And so the balancing act is in the prison system is what are the objectives of the prison and their security protocols, and then what do you require as far as worship time or whatever it is that you do as far as your culture is concerned. So that's where that comes in. So no matter if you take a person from the free world and incarcerate them, they still have those rights. They still have the right to their religion, their speech, their publications, or their documents, or their Bibles, or their Qurans. They have those rights. They have to be able to have those rights. So, and in that respect, there's a balancing act, like I said. And if those rights are infringed upon, then that's where the legal matters come in, and then you assert who you are in relation to your religion, in relation to your rights, and you say that this is not being provided. So without the legal controversy, those things are provided, let's just say.
Okay.
So those institutions are allowed. That's where we go and we do our teaching. So now the prison administration, they understand, because we have to, in the process of community, let's just say, we have to communicate. So we communicate to prison officials or to society, or right now on this video to anybody watching. You know, we are to get to know each other. We are to get to know each other's practices. We can watch, you know, I can get to know the Greeks. I can get to know the Romans. I can get to know the French. I can get to know anybody. So it's important as I get to know people that they get to know me and what I'm
Right.
about. That creates respect.
Right.
So when in the system, what we do is we let the chaplain or the warden or whoever is in charge, institutional program managers, know and understand of our religion, our customs, our practices. Um, the temple serves mostly as an institution to teach people who don't know.
Okay.
So it serves a broad purpose, but limited as well. It is not the full manifestation of what a Moor is, a Moorish American is. It is a teaching tool.
Okay.
So it says, with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed. So that's what we do in the temple. So, and we have a certain format that we adhere to. So, you know, we open our meetings, we conduct our prayer, we read our constitution and bylaws, just like a regular corporate meeting. We read our additional laws. We open with what we have is a Circle 7 guide, which is what we call the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Circle 7. It's our book. Then we have what we call the 101s, or Moorish questions for young Moorish children. So children meaning anybody who's new and coming into the knowledge. And from that, we have, you know, we have a dialogue that takes about an hour and a half, and people can ask questions.
Okay.
And, you know, we take an hour and a half, then we close off our meetings, we take our minutes, and then we leave. And from that, you know, it creates the dialogue. In that process, people can, if they're Moor and they identify that way, they can proclaim their nationality, which is stand up and say, I claim that for myself. I understand what I've learned, that I am a Moorish American. I am one of the descendants of the people who were here, of the people who came here during the time of slavery or were already here, who provided the sciences, who taught people language, culture, food, all of these types of things. I identify with that. And so you say, okay, I proclaim that. And they take upon themselves the L or the Bay as the affix to their last name to give them a connection, a cultural connection to the Moorish history. And then from that point forward, it is on that person. Now that person engages more actively with the temple. You know, it opens him up to the possibilities of himself, because he's learning, like we say, one of the divine creeds, or one of the teachings that we say, is honor and respect thy mother and thy father, that thy days may be long upon the land that the earth, that the Lord thy God Allah hath given thee. And when we say that, you know, we're not just talking about your mother and your father, that, you know, the people who gave you birth or brought you into the world. We're also talking about, you know, the earth is the mother, you know, God, the creator, whatever you want to call it, Allah is the father. But we also say your generational, your ancient forefathers, those that were before you, and it multiplies exponentially. So, and there are people that had nothing to do with slavery. There are people that were never enslaved. You know what I'm saying? So take that limitation off the mind. And when you say your life will be long or longer upon the earthland, it's because now you're connecting to you know, greatness. You're connecting to something beyond yourself. You're connecting to something beyond the 90s or the 80s or the 70s, or that exceeds civil rights era, or it goes beyond slavery. It traverses planes. It, you know, it carries in with it all different types of languages, all different types of sciences. And when you do that and you're tracing it back, you know, you're going back not just 100 years, not just 200 years, not just 500 years, thousands of years. You know, when you're tying that in, we say our flag is over 10,000 years old, and that's just our flag. And say it's over 10,000 years old. So when you understand that and you start bringing that in, you have an appreciation for yourself, You know, that's what we say in the temple. We say we are uplifting fallen humanity just by that practice of teaching that, look, you actually have a flag, you actually have a prophet, somebody came to you, you actually have a connection to something outside of slavery. You can look at slavery as just the downfall part, but that, you know, it's been magnified too much. So now, because it's been magnified so much, that's like me taking, or my whole family tree being reduced to the time that I went to prison. It's like, no, I went to prison, but everybody didn't go, you know. So, but if you take that and make that the whole story of my family tree, you really limit, you circumscribe the people. So we're really against, you know, what we call, you know, circumscribing, because circumscribing is putting a limitation on it. But there is a limit to you, but we exceed those limits. You know what I'm saying? And we have to learn how we are limiting ourselves and how we have been limited by other people around us, and how we even promote limitation by even continuing on. Like if I go out and say, I'm a prisoner, I'm a prisoner, I'm a prisoner, I'm putting myself in my own box, and people will relate to me in that way. So if I go out and I say, well, I'm black, I'm Negro, I'm black, I'm colored, I was a slave, well, you're putting yourself in your own box. You know, so the point of this is for the upliftment of fallen humanity. Fallen humanity, the people who fell, and the fallen state of humanity itself. But if you are not right, the people around you can't be right. If you aren't connected to anything, if you don't see that this is your land right here, you will defile your land, because you will think that you are doing something. You're terrorizing the land, or you're polluting on the land because you don't feel it's connected to you. So one of the things that you learn about is your connection to the land itself, which is understanding your indigenous aspect of your identity. And then indigenous is basically saying that I'm one with this land, that me and this land are one, that the fruit from the land is helpful to me. The vegetation is not harmful. The air is good. The water, it replenishes. You know, this land right here is good for me, and I'm connected to it. I'm not hostile against it. I must protect it. I'm one with it. I'm in harmony with it. And so that a lot of those things, they've been removed from a person when your own stuff can be repurposed or stolen away from you, or you give it away. Because one thing we don't do, we don't point a lot of fingers and say, oh, somebody put us in slavery and this, that. No, because that's not how our prophet brings it to us. He says, all nations suffer slavery because they honor not the creed and principles of their forefathers, but strayed after other gods of whom they knew nothing. They went another way, and they did not respect what was given to them. They did not hold that. They did not teach that to their children. They abandoned it, and they did something else. And that does not mean that someone overpowered me and took me into an enslaved state. Like if I know myself and I'm like, well, I don't think that you can come over here and overpower me and take me into some weird enslavement, because me and you are men, and I don't see that you being that much stronger than me. I'm not going to let you do that to me. So then I have to start to think and be like, well, how did we end up in that state?
Okay, hold it right there, because that's where that's a question that I think everybody is going to want to know. How did we get there? How did we get from where we were, you know, centuries ago? How did we get past that? How do we go into the future? Well, how do we transition? So when we come back, we're going to talk about the reform and advocacy part. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you for it.